And now we're going to go into the next portion, which is the portion called Bahalotka. And in this portion, a lot happens. There's certain portions in the Torah where there's only one or two themes or one or two stories. In this portion, there's many different things happening, but a good part of it deals with prophecy. So I will explain that it's mostly the second half of the portion of Bahalotka, which is the third portion of the book of Numbers. And it starts with the people are complaining again in the desert. And Moses is kind of at his wit's end. He doesn't know how to deal with the people. They seem to be complaining all the time. So Moses goes to God and says, like, I need help here. Like, I can't carry this whole burden by myself. So God says, okay, we will appoint 70 elders, and I will take some of your spirit and I will put it on these 70 elders, and they will help you lead the people. And this is the beginning of this idea of the 70 elders, which became translated in the highest court of Israel, which now we call it the High Court, at least in America. There's city courts and then state courts and then federal courts, and then you have the highest court calling the Supreme Court. And this is really coming right from the Torah. These 70 elders became the 70 members of Israel's Supreme Court, called the Sanhedrin. Okay, so what happens is like this, is there are 12 tribes, and if they're going to be 70 elders, well, not every tribe will get an equal amount of representatives, because 12 times 6 is 72. But if you only have 70, it doesn't come out even. So they did a lottery, and there were 72 candidates, but only 70 of the cards said you're one of them. 2 of them said like an X. You won't be one of them. And so there were 2 of these very wise people who said, we won't even do the lottery. We'll step down. And these 2, they began to prophesy in the camp. So this is a very deep connection with the hands again, because in Hebrew, in the Torah, how does a rabbi pass on his ordination to a student? It's called smicha, which literally means the laying of the hands. And until this day, we have this concept that a rabbi becomes a rabbi, as it were, that his teacher lays his hands on their head and transfers symbolically their spirit to their student. So these 2, they were called Eldad and Medad. So they began to prophesy in the camp. And what were they prophesying? Now we have to understand that this is in the second year in the desert, and Israel was supposed to enter into the promised land. This is before the whole incident with the spies, and we ended up 40 years wandering in the desert. So they were prophesying that Moses will die and Joshua will lead the people into the land. So Joshua, who is the loyalist student of Moses, ran to Moses and said, stop them. Stop them saying this. And even though it was talking about him, that he was going to lead the people, like that's the last thing that Joshua wanted is for him to lead the people in and not his teacher Moses. He couldn't even imagine such a thing. So he said, stop them. And listen what Moses said. Moses said, are you jealous for me? Would it be that all of the people were prophets? So this is a very important statement that Moses is saying. Would it be that all of the people would be prophets? So that's the story. There's a lot more that could be said here. But then another thing happens. It follows close to this. And that is that I mentioned before that the Jewish way is not to be celibate. That holiness does not mean not getting married. That's not our way. I'm not making a value judgment, but that's just not our way. Others could see it differently. But at a certain point, Moses did separate from his wife. And his sister and brother, Miriam and Aaron, in a sense, complained to God and said, why is Moses doing this? They didn't realize that in this, every general rule has an exception. And Moses was an exception, as we're going to see in a second. So God called Moses, Aaron, and Miriam together. And I'm going to read it to you in English because this is the basis in the Torah all about prophecy. Like every word is very, very important here. But this is what happens. After they complained, God called them together and he said like this. So God said, hear now my words. Again, if people want to follow this or look it up later, it's chapter 12 of Numbers. And it really begins the first verse, 12:1 of Numbers. I'm starting in the 6th verse though. So God says, hear now my words. If there shall be a prophet among you, in a vision shall I, God, make myself known to them. In a dream shall I speak with them. Not so is my servant Moses. In my entire house, he is the trusted one. Mouth to mouth do I speak to him, in a clear vision and not in riddles. At the image of God, he gazes. Only a few sentences, but what we learn here is so much of the general ideas about prophecy and the difference between Moses, and all other prophets. So we're told that Moses had what we'll call a direct line to God. That's why it says, mouth to mouth, I speak with him. In another place, it says, face to face, I speak with him, and not in riddles. In other words, God spoke to Moshe. It actually says in the Torah, like a person speaks to their friend. In other words, Moses had what's called clear prophecy. All the other prophets had what's called unclear prophecy, and God spoke to them in either a dream-like state or a riddle or a symbolic language. Now, it doesn't mean that the prophet isn't getting a clear message from God. It is a clear message, but it's enclosed in symbolism. We're told that all the prophets, when they received prophecy, the experience was overwhelming. I think we could all imagine if God would actually come and speak to any of us, we would imagine that it would be a awe-inspiring kind of experience. And that's why it said only Moses had this relationship where he spoke to God like a person speaks to their friend. It doesn't mean that Moses didn't have the ultimate awe of God. He did. But God granted him clear prophecy. And all the other prophets, that's why he says, I will come to them in a dream-like state. What it means is in a type of moment of clarity. And this is something I think everyone can understand. There are certain times in life, and it happens differently to each person, that we have moments of clarity. And it's not like we're hearing God's voice. It's not like God is saying A, B, C, D. But in 1 minute, one flash of consciousness, sometimes something we've struggled with for years will become clear to us in an instant. So we're told that that's how prophecy worked. But the prophet, in a sense, was temporarily overwhelmed by this clarity. And only afterwards were they able to express the very specific message they were getting from God in words that we read in the Bible. But by Moses, it was different. God spoke to him and he was clear-minded the whole time. And that's why we're told, actually, remember we said that Shabbat is 1/60th of the world to come. So we're told also that dreams are 1/60th of prophecy. It doesn't mean that every dream is prophetic. Most dreams are far from prophetic. But probably everyone also has had maybe once or twice in their life where they dreamt about something happening. It's not a totally unusual occurrence that we'll dream about something happening and then it happens. And then it's like, whoa, how does that work? But it does. Many people have this experience where they dream that something is about to happen. And then a day later, a month later, it actually happens. It actually happens. So there's much more, obviously, to say about prophecy, but in just a few sentences, we learn a lot about the prophetic experience. And one of the most important things is that we're told that the age of prophecy is over. It ended in the Second Temple period, which is around 2,300 years ago. But we're told prophecy, the age of prophecy ended, but people having prophetic experiences never ended. Today, we call them spiritual experiences or mystical experiences. But prophetic experiences still happen. and they happen to many, many, many people. And we're told that when the Messiah comes, what Moses originally said, would it be that all the people were prophets, we're told will come true. Because along with the coming of the Messiah, the Messiah will usher in a new level of human consciousness. It's something that we could barely understand now because we're used to the type of consciousness that we have. But we're told that the light of God, the revelation of godliness, will be far greater than anything that we can imagine. And that will bring a new consciousness to human beings, between nations and individuals. And part of that will be that prophecy, in a sense, will be just like Moses said, would it be that all the people were prophets will actually come true. So I think we're going to end there. And I will end with a blessing, as we learned about the priestly blessing. And that is exactly the priestly blessing, that God should guard and protect us. God should shine his light and show us grace. And God should help the world find a way to live in peace with each other. I can't think of a better blessing than that.